when an emergency does happen, when disaster strikes, that is not the moment to be thinking about what is my role? What am I supposed to do? That's the moment to get in gear and get in action and get going, because that's the moment we've trained for. That's the moment we've prepared for. And we have that muscle memory to just kick in because we know what to do.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now, it's time to roll back and start the first case. On this week's episode of First Case, Chris and I are kicking off Season 12 with our own personal stories of experiencing the unexpected. We're also going to talk about some of the themes that we will be discussing later on in the season, and hopefully we will be able to highlight the importance of education, of readiness, and of continued training. Because when it's time to act, you really don't have time to think. You just need to get in there and get it done. And the key to being able to do that is through regular education and practice. And Chris, you are going to be highlighting some of that for us through your own experience this episode.
Yes, and giving maybe just a couple of tips, tricks, and things you should never leave home without.
And we want to make sure we know what those are. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a short break.
Hi, I'm Chris Blevins.
And I'm Melanie Perry.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to First Case.
Welcome to Season 12 of First Case. This season is all about preparing for and expecting the unexpected. We're going to be learning how to be ready, how to stay ready, and how to keep our teams educated and prepared in the event of any type of emergency or disaster. And you know, Chris, just recently, there was a whole swath of tornadoes that hit from Texas all the way up to the Great Lakes, and just so much damage that we saw come through on the news. And currently, as we're recording this, there are still reports of damage and loss of life and other things from all of the tornado outbreaks that recently happened. And while all disasters don't show up as natural disasters, emergencies aren't just the things that Mother Nature brings us. It does remind us that we have to always be ready, because we never know what may happen, whether it's from nature or any other possibility around us. We always have to be ready.
It's true. And the only thing I think that is expected is to expect the unexpected.
Exactly.
Because nothing is as it was once thought of. And even Tornado Alley isn't once Tornado Alley, right? And so we have to be ready. And I think to even define what is ready is completely different than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I'm excited because this is a little unique for us, right? Season 12 brings a different perspective, but one that I think is very much necessary. And I'm looking forward to not just this conversation, but every single one of the episodes that's to come.
Yeah, I think it's good to have these types of conversations, because we're stepping out of the operating room, so to speak. Of course, as operating room professionals, if there was a mass casualty event, or if there was a natural disaster, or any type of event that caused our big ORs to go on diversion, or our small ORs were suddenly having to take on different kinds of patients, like all these different variables that play into how we function as an operating room. But looking at it bigger, as a healthcare system as a whole, and how does the healthcare system respond to a natural disaster or to an emergency event of any kind, and thinking beyond just the four walls of the operating room and looking at it in a bigger light. I think it's helpful for us to see the bigger picture and to see all of the wheels and the gears and everything that goes into planning for and preparing for these events. And I think it also helps us really appreciate the roles of our emergency management professionals and our disaster planning and our educators and those people who are tasked with keeping us educated and keeping us prepared, right?
Yeah. What does that even mean, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. What is being prepared? And also, I think that we have to have a good understanding of what it is that, we internally feel is our role, because all of us got into healthcare for some reason, right? And a lot of us, it's simply because we want to help. And when you have these huge events, whether it's in your local town or something that you're watching on the news, you can't help but have this innate urge to want to help and want to do. And a lot of the times you get stuck in, what does that even mean, right? Like, how in the world am I supposed to take what I can do in the operating room, or just, my urge to help as a human being? And what does that mean? Or how can I take that into something actionable and make a difference? And so I think we're going to hear not just from your experience and my experience, but from a lot of our guests this season, and figure out what that is. And maybe there is some small role we can play that's going to make a huge difference in our community or that of others. And, we're going to figure out how to help our fellow human. That's going to be a big deal for all of us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, too, that when an emergency does happen, when disaster strikes, that is not the moment to be thinking about, what is my role? What am I supposed to do? That's the moment to get in gear and get in action and get going, because that's the moment we've trained for. That's the moment we've prepared for. And we have that muscle memory to just kick in because we know what to do. Conversations like this are those times where we sit and think, okay, what is my role? What would I do? How would I do things? Because it's calm, it's peaceful, and I don't have my adrenaline flooding my brain trying to figure out what's going on. And so we can very calmly take a step back and talk through these different scenarios, think about these situations, and apply that to things that we might see or we know are at risk for our area. Like where I live, I know that tornadoes are just a thing. We just live with them all the time, and hurricanes even can affect me somewhat. I'm close enough to the coast that we can be affected by hurricanes, but everybody has their different natural disasters that they are very familiar with and they're just very used to. But then there's also so many other unexpected events, cybercrime, cybersecurity breaches, mass casualty events, like we already mentioned, a pandemic. That's, everybody gets affected by so many different things. So, but anyway, that's the beauty of a season like this, to be able to sit and talk about these things so that when they do happen, we've already had those conversations and we kind of have that extra layer of education and thinking about it so that we're ready when it does happen. But I want to talk about you first, Chris. So you have some very interesting training in this area. So why don't you just take the mic and tell us about it?
So, yes, I'm a certified surgical technologist. And in that realm, I was trained as a trauma scrub and I did transplants. But outside of the operating room, you're right, I've had some pretty significant training. My husband was in the Air Force. We were stationed overseas for 6 years. I worked at a trauma hospital. Part of that was an opportunity for me to learn some triage. So I was able to get training for some of our Angel flights that went downrange. That was really, really interesting. And that sparked some of my interest in what happens outside of the operating room, right? So I learned an acronym called MARCHES. So it's how our medics are trained to walk into this awful, right, god-awful situation, right? You have bleeding, you have an emotional response to everything around you, right? The first thing that you are taught is that someone's emotional response to the pain that they are experiencing does not dictate whether or not they are a priority. which sounds really cold, right?
Yeah.
So like my 12-year-old will scream with a splinter. That does not mean he needs an amputation, right?
Exactly.
So
you are not a priority right now. Calm down.
Exactly right. You are breathing. The fact that you can scream means that you still have a clear airway. So we're going to calm the hell down, right?
Yeah, right.
So those kinds of things. But in that same kind of mind frame, right? I was able to take kind of some of that training that I was able to take advantage of as a civilian. And when we came back to the States, there was an organization in my hometown called CERT. And it's not just unique to Texas or Ellis County. This is a community organization. It's an acronym that stands for Community Emergency Response Team. And it was developed as a part of the Department of Emergency Response. And it's a federal organization. And it was an attempt to bring in civilians that wanted to assist the Federal Department of Emergency Management and FEMA in times of specifically like natural disaster, right? So you had tornadoes that come into a community and destroy neighborhoods, right? Or you have hurricanes. Hurricane Katrina is a wonderful example of that. What happens also in a search and rescue? So what if we have a child that goes missing and you have volunteers that want to go and search and do search grids, things of that nature. So it was FEMA's attempt to take civilians and give them training in order to teach them these kinds of plans, right? So when you have these emergencies that happen, you can take these groups of people that have already been trained, that already have the knowledge base. They already have everything that they need so that they can be put into action quickly and they can actually do things that are needed and there's not a delay.
They can be mobilized and they
can
be helpful. Right?
There we go.
That's
Bam.
the word,
That's
right?
the word, right? So mobilized, right?
But it's not just mobilizing them, it's having people who are helpful and actually can
they can actually do things, right?
Do things, yeah.
Yes. So with my medical training, they also needed someone. So there was a special opportunity. So I became the medical liaison between the CERT team and our medical trained FEMA people. So our fire department, the EMTs, our paramedics, which was a really cool opportunity. So I was able to start training people on Stop the Bleed, which is also a national movement to teach people proper tourniquet use, to teach them about sucking chest wounds, right? To teach people what to do when they come upon these situations, because those kinds of injuries also happen in tornadoes. They also happen in hurricanes and that kind of thing. So it was a really cool, neat opportunity for me to use my medical training and then also to use the training that I had gotten as a part of Lone Star Regional Medical Center and to kind of put it all together. And it all happened to come to fruition in one big awful catastrophe called Hurricane Harvey.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So you remember the Hurricane Harvey,
sure
right?
do.
Yeah. So 2017, Hurricane Harvey hits. Of course, I'm in Dallas County, which is north central Texas. Thankfully, Hurricane Harvey didn't get all the way up there, but all of these people in the Houston area were displaced because they didn't have anywhere to go. Hurricane Harvey had wiped out the Houston area, Corpus Christi, all of that, and they needed an area for all of these people to be transported to. And so part of that big mass movement of people happened to be into the Dallas region. So what they decided to do was Reunion Arena, which is kind of a big place there where I saw a lot of concerts.
Yeah.
My fondest memory is Garth Brooks, right? Garth Brooks played at Reunion Arena. So this was a massively different utilization.
Different utilization of that facility.
Totally all my friends in low places. Yes, this is a different meaning, right? So Garth Brooks, So what they did though, which was really phenomenal, FEMA came in. And the Department of Emergency Management, along with the Dallas people, fire departments, the American Red Cross, they came in and they converted the parking garage of Reunion Arena into a shelter. Melanie, I swear it happened overnight. It was like, bam, you want to talk about all of this preparation turning into action? It was amazing. And so what they needed was for these different county CERT teams to come in. And here I was with my medical bag. And I wish we had a blog post because I could show you. Like I have the neon orange,
hey,
right?
Hey, we can make a blog post happen. Okay. Let's just say we'll make it happen.
Maybe I'll put it in our LinkedIn when this episode airs, right?
Yeah.
So I have my bright reflective medical stuff. I have my hard hat. I've got this like 20-pound medical bag with all of my triage equipment and my ambu bag. You know, I'm ready. Like, if you need an airway, I've got you. Right? I got you, right? Anyway, I'm ready. And lo and behold, there was not one piece of my medical background that needed to be utilized in this particular instance.
Really?
Yeah, not one.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing when you stop to think about all of the things that are needed in, you know, these instances. And you think, you know, yes, in Houston, that's where that kind of thing would have been necessary, right? Like you have these people that, you know, they needed tourniquet applications and they have these acute injuries that need to be handled. And of course, they're taken in these hospitals. But when it came to the CERT team and once all of these people would bust into this, you know, parking garage that now became their temporary home, you know, the person that required the most love and the most care and the person that came out at me was the mom and the educator.
Right. I can see that.
So it was people management. So as the CERT coordinator and as the medical liaison, our job was to coordinate the volunteers. So you have all of these people that come in and they want to help. And you have Lions Club members, and we had Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and we had PTA members, and God, you name it, they came in and they just want to help, but you have no idea. You have no idea their background. You have no idea, you know, what skills they bring. Also, I would hate to be remiss, but you also have no idea what their criminal background is.
Yeah. Or what their motive is for being there.
Yeah, exactly. We had people came in with their iPhones and tried to video record, you know, strangers. It was awful. So, you know, we did a lot of that. A lot of it was me holding babies so mamas could eat, you know.
Oh gosh, wow.
Some of it was helping people, you know, find food and shelter, and it was crazy. But we did that for days and nights and shift work. There's a lot of reporting, but I think the most thing that I want to take just from Hurricane Harvey, and just specifically that, was the amount of planning that went into it and how all of the preparation and the trainings and, you know, we had an every other Wednesday training that our CERT team went through. And we would always have a guest come in and we would have, you know, we had forms that everyone knew about. And we had, you know, there was a right and a wrong way to do things, even to the point of how you would write notes so that the next shift knew, you know, how to read those notes, kind of like in shift change at the hospital.
Yeah,
right?
With our shift change reports and all the data that we have to, you know, pass on for sure.
But if it hadn't been for all of that training, which can seem tedious and boring, and you almost think that it's not necessary, you know, we never would have been able to become actionable and to be mobilized as quickly as possible. And you almost take it for granted. And it's something that you hope that you never have to use. But we're so grateful that we did when it came to it. So, yeah. So I know that was my experience with a disaster, you know, with a hurricane. Much different than a disaster within a hospital, you know, but you too have had an experience with a hurricane and with a disaster of a different type. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, Melanie.
Yeah, actually, it's one of the reasons that I was motivated to do this season, because once again, going back to what we talked about earlier, the unexpected is pretty much guaranteed. It's going to happen. But in the moment, when something actually happens, do you know what to do? Or are you stuck, frozen, unsure of what to do because you haven't been properly trained? Or it was just something nobody ever thought would ever happen. So we never talked about it. And then suddenly you're trying to deal with the situation on the fly and hope that you've done your best, right? So back in 2018, I was at work and I was finishing up my shift. It was really close to the time to go home. And I work 12-hour shifts. And man, oh man, I mean, at the end of the day,
you're ready.
We are ready to go. And my facility, I'm the team leader for orthopedics. We do a ton of cases, and Wednesdays were really, really heavy ortho days. So on top of just being ready to go home, you're just exhausted too. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm so done. Well, I still had a few rooms still going. They were going past 7. And I was still hanging out because I still had rooms going, getting finished though, where it was getting close where I was going to be able to leave. And I was pushing a case cart for somebody up to our decontamination area when, you hear some weird noises in the background and you can't place them because they're not noises that belong in your facility. So you don't really know what's going on. And then as I'm going up the ramp with this case cart, our shift leader for the sterile processing department is coming toward me, being held up by one of our other sterile processing employees, clutching his chest, bleeding. And he's, telling me that he's been shot. And I don't expect people that I work with to tell me that they have been shot. It did not have a place to land in my brain. And at first I thought he was joking. I mean, it was like, what are you talking about?
OR
humor. Let's all admit it. The OR is known for having dark, crazy humor. So I wouldn't put it past somebody, but after that night, I would never, but it's not something you expect. And I'm looking at him and he's clutching his chest. He's pale. He's obviously scared, in pain. And the guy who's holding him up doesn't know what to do other than get him to help. And so, I'm like, and then in that very moment, you're like, what do I do? What do I do? And there are 2 charge nurses there, me and one other charge nurse. She ran the desk. I was out on the floor taking care of rooms and stuff. But so I go get her and I go get this guy who's been shot and lay him on an OR table because I don't know what else to do for him, and go get anesthesia so that anesthesia can come help us so that we know what to do. And in the course of that night, in the course of the experience of all of that, it ended up our director of sterile processing and this other person both got shot that night. Our director ended up losing her life. And the gentleman that I just talked about, he ended up surviving, and he made a miraculous recovery and from his injuries and everything else. But the lessons taken away from that night, being in a chaotic, fearful, scary situation. At one point, we didn't know where the shooter was. Information and communication was hard, challenging to try to make sure people knew what was going on. All we knew was what the first guy had told us and that he had been shot. And he told us that the director had also been shot, but he didn't tell us where the shooter was. We didn't know. So was this an active shooter event? Was he going to come shoot anybody else? Were we going to have any other injuries, any other loss of life? We had no idea. And our sterile processing employees are the ones who found their director. They found her shot. We got her into an OR. And then all of the things that just started falling into place. Our facility was part of, an academic medical center, but we aren't the level 1 trauma center. That's not us. So we had the trauma center people quickly getting over from the main campus. We had the trauma doc, we had supplies, everything was coming in. Our leadership team was coming, but they got there. But at the same time, because we didn't know where the shooter was, it got reported as an active shooter event. So you had the police treating it like an active shooter event, and they're all over the OR. You can't really get anything done. It's hard to move around police people. And so it was just chaotic. And in the middle of all of that, with trying to get the supplies that were needed for the OR that was running for our director, and trying to get the other person who was shot transferred up to our emergency department so he could get transferred over to the other facility to be managed and taken care of, and just not knowing what do we do? What's the right thing to do? Like immediately after it happened, we're told that he's been shot. We go to get our anesthesia attending to get his help. And then it's like, y'all need to call the police. I'm like, do we call the police? Are we allowed to call 911 or do we have to call campus police? Like, who are we supposed to call?
Yeah.
Like, that shouldn't be a question. It just shouldn't. I should not be asking that question because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Right. But our facility is so big. And, back in my very first time of orientation, they talk about campus security and campus police and all these people that you're supposed to call. And in that moment, I don't know why it really mattered to me, but I really needed to know who the right person was to call. And I think it's because at the end of it all, when it's all said and done, you're the person that's in charge and you don't want them to come back to you and tell you did the wrong thing, because we are so used to things happen. We make a decision on the fly because we don't know. And then we find out, well, you did it wrong. That was not what you were supposed to do. And so there's that fear of not wanting to do the wrong thing.
Of course.
And so that was just one example of many. And then when word got out, because obviously it hit news very quickly, and news stations are reporting it. We've got people set up outside trying to get any information they can. Our employees started calling, and they were calling and calling and calling. They were calling the phone that I carry. They were calling our desk, our main OR desk. They were calling all of our phones. And with all of the phones ringing, I couldn't get the phone calls out that I needed to get out because my phones were completely inundated with calls. And it was so hard to get a phone call out or try to get the calls that other people were calling that we needed to talk to, but they couldn't get in because of all of the employees who, of course, they were concerned. Of course they cared and they wanted to know that everybody was okay. I don't fault them necessarily for wanting to know, but in the moment and in an emergency situation, like, you need the phone lines. Well, I found out later that we have a dedicated emergency phone. I just didn't know about it because I didn't know. I think I might have been told that in my orientation one day, way at the beginning. But in orientation, you get told so many different things, and if it doesn't have a place to land, because
at the same time you're being told about health insurance and you're being told about everything else.
I don't know, and it never got reviewed again. It's not like it was something that you were told every year. But by the way, we have a dedicated phone that nobody can call that you can call out on any time. Oh, well, that would have been great to know. Like, I just didn't know. So all of those things and all of the experience of traumatically dealing with your own employee that has been shot, the one who is bleeding and dying on your own OR table, the other one that you put into an OR that's really not the best OR to put him in. I put him in our cysto room, for crying out loud, but that was the first room I ran to and it had a big table, so I put him on it.
There you go.
Not ideal, okay? Right. But we got him out and he survived and is doing well. And not because I put him on one bed or the other, just because they were able to respond quickly to him and save him and get him the care that he needed. Our director's injuries were just too severe and there was just nothing. They tried very hard, but then also in the middle of all of that, just trying to coordinate. We had 2 other operating rooms that were still going. And in the chaos of it all, they got left out in terms of communicating with them what was going on. So they didn't know. They didn't. And that is one thing that I feel very guilty about because I feel like I should have done that. I should have communicated with them. And I didn't. Oh, no. Not on purpose.
No, but you were handling what you could handle.
Yeah. But when I look back, I'm like, I should have remembered the scared employees we had in those 2 ORs and given them a phone call and said, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. You're not in any danger. There is no active shooter, or he's no longer a risk. Like all of these things that could have been communicated. And once again, it's just another one of those things that you think about after you process it and after the fact, that how much better it could have gone for the people who were just unfortunate, not bystanders, but unfortunate participants in the whole experience because they were in the OR at the same time, but they had no control over anything because they were in a room with a patient asleep on the table. And they were also at the mercy of those of us outside to communicate with them. And I didn't do a good job doing that. So lots of different just experiences and details. But when you think about disaster like that, when it happens in your department, I mean, it hits you, I mean, right at the core. And and thinking about, how would I respond next time? How would I do it better? Now that I've lived through it, how do I make better decisions next time? God forbid it happens again, because we all know that workplace violence is on the rise and that things are probably going to happen again. Hopefully not.
Well, and
but there's always a chance.
There is. And the only way you can do that in the process is by talking about it. And, we've all been in trauma situations and the OR, like what you and I don't think of as a trauma situation, what you and I think of as a daily, a routine surgery, to somebody who didn't work in the operating room, that's trauma. Like, you see somebody cut open, you see a bone on a table, you see a fracture. That's normal. Right. That's a day in life, right? To somebody outside of the operating room, that's trauma, right? But we have that line. We have that kind of barrier that allows us to get that muscle memory that we have been trained so well to be able to function. So we see a fracture or we see something go wrong we see an artery hit. That training that we had, that we have spoken about, that we have a routine for, that we have, a plan A, B, and C in. We know what to happen, and we are able to function, and we are able to go into action, right? And so there isn't that trauma brain that kicks in. You had never been in that experience before, and you didn't have that barrier. It was too close to home for that training to kick in. And there's got to be a level of grace, Yeah. But the only way it's going to happen is by talking. I'm so thankful that you're sharing it with me and that you're sharing it with our audience, because I know that there's somebody else out there that has experienced something similar and is feeling a lot of the same things that you're feeling as somebody who is having to reflect on such a hard experience and such a hard thing. Nobody ever goes through anything and comes out the other end thinking that they flew by and did it perfectly.
Yeah, I could totally agree with that statement. And definitely being my own critic, looking back through that night and through what, with everything that happened, and just thinking, well, why didn't I think of this? Or how come I didn't do this? Or why didn't I do that? And hindsight's 2020. We all have the best vision when we're looking back on it. But whether it's a situation like this that we never, ever, ever want anyone to experience, or whether it's the natural disasters that we plan for, that we know are coming, or even things now like pandemics or like cybersecurity attacks, or even just because we are healthcare professionals and we're out in public with our friends and somebody falls off the cliff and now we have to take care of them, right? No matter the situation, if we can put some thought into those types of events and think through, what would I do? What should I do? What are my steps to take? Then we do have at least that starting point of, well, I've thought about it already. And I thought about it when I wasn't scared. And so I can click through what I'm supposed to do because I'm prepared in that sense, because I've learned what those next steps are to take. So I think that there is value. Yes, it's very hard for me to talk about that night, and I don't talk about it very often, but I knew that it was going to come up in this season with the people that we are going to be talking to. And because it really influences a lot of my desire to make sure that people are prepared, because I don't want somebody else to be in the situation I was in. So I'm sure we'll hear this story or hear bits and pieces of it as we talk to some of our guests. And so it's helpful to at least get most of kind of the details out of the way up front so people kind of know what's going on.
Absolutely.
But there's value in talking about it for sure.
There really is. And there's healing in it for you and for those of us who are listening to it, for sure. Yeah. So it's going to be a good season, but everybody, get your heartstrings ready to be pulled on. And also, I think get ready to be uncomfortable, because we learned when we're uncomfortable. But I think also that we can't have our blinders on. God forbid that we're ever in any of these situations. And I hope that none of you are. But if you are, let's be ready and let's be prepared. Let's have that tourniquet in our car. Let's have that quick clot. Any of you out there, you're going to all smile, because I guarantee somebody out there has got a Dermabond in their purse. So maybe some sterile gloves in their glove box. For sure. Right. So maybe let's just add to that quick med kit. But let's be prepared. That way, it's not our fight or flight that happens, but we're cool, calm, and collected, and we can do more good and walk away with a little cooler head.
Absolutely. Well, you really wrapped it up really nicely, but we can't go yet because you teased out something that I've got to find out. So before we can finish this conversation, you have got to tell me, what is it you don't leave without?
Oh my gosh. So, I mentioned that big med, backpack that I have, which by the way is still in my garage. Always. But
are the supplies still up to date?
Oh, well, most of them. The gloves are crunchy, my friend. The gloves are crunchy,
So maybe we need to replace those.
We probably do, yeah. But the ambu bag, by God, would still work, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, for sure. But no, I always learned. So from all of the EMTs, the fire, our firefighters, all of those, medics that did our angel flights, there are 5 things that I will never, ever leave without. So they're in my cars. They're in my kids' cars. The first one is an Israeli bandage. By the way, you can buy all of these on Amazon. I don't get any kickbacks, no money. It's exchanging hands here.
Well, I'm thinking we're going to do a blog post that goes along with this, and I will make sure we put these 5 things with links. So please continue.
So first one, Israeli bandage. The second one is a vented chest seal. It's for sucking chest wounds, like you get pummeled, right? Also, a dip can seal will work for that. Ew. I'll tell the story later. Gross. All right. The second is a CAT tourniquet, and CAT stands for a combat application tourniquet. The fourth one is quick clot.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, the fifth one is Dermabond or super glue.
Dermabond or super glue.
Dermabond or super glue. But those 5 things are in every vehicle that I have ever driven since probably 2015. But everybody should have those things, and you can purchase them on Amazon. But yeah, we should totally link up to that. But
we will. Yeah. We'll put these out there in a blog post that comes out the same week as this episode.
That'd
so we'll make sure that everybody can access those. And also see a fantastic picture of Chris all prepped out with her emergency outfit and supplies.
Define fantastic, but it'll be a good time. So,
all right. Well, we have run out of time, as we always do.
As usual.
But I think that this was a great way to set the stage and just introduce the season, and also to really talk about our own personal motives and desires for having a season like this, and why we both are motivated and feel that it's so important to have these discussions. So we've got a great lineup of guests. You're not going to want to miss a single interview. So make sure that you come back every week and stay tuned, because we're going to learn a lot. All right, that was a fantastic introduction and table setting conversation for our season on disaster preparedness. As we're recording, I haven't really worked out the title for the season, but something along the lines of expecting the unexpected or being prepared in all situations. All of those themes apply to what we're going to talk about this season. And Chris, I think it's fascinating what your community offered and what you were able to learn and how you were able to train. And then for a community to mobilize so quickly to help people who were displaced from a natural disaster. It's just nothing we ever want to experience, but it's really cool to see how all that training comes into play and is helpful when you need it.
It is. And I think as much as we think that, who we are trained to become matters, in both of our experiences, it was the human in us that mattered at the end of the day. And I think that the rawness of what we all experience is what we're going to find in every one of these episodes this season. And I look forward to it. And I hope our listeners do too, because at the end of the day, we're all going to come together, and maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll never have to use it. But if we do, we're going to do a lot of good.
Exactly. And yeah, we are going to be ready. We've had one more conversation, one more file to put away in our brains of education and things that we can think about for future instances. But for now, that is going to do it for this introductory episode of season 12. But we really do have so much great content that is packed into this season. So please don't miss a single interview. On behalf of Chris, myself, and the whole team here at First Case, thanks for listening to this week's podcast.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.